Good morning. Welcome to Closing Time with Jeff West. This is episode 4, and I'm really lucky today. My guest is Andrew Sloan, and Andrew is the mayor of Central Elgin. We're going to talk a little bit about everything in real estate today. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Jeff.
How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Good. Now, Central Elgin is has a very interesting layout. I'm wondering if you could kind of take us through the boundaries.
Sure. So we encompass the circle around St. Thomas, Port Stanley, Belmont, New Sarum, East End and West End of St. Thomas, Union, Sparta. I'm here today in Port Stanley. So the two largest villages, towns, cities, whatever, Belmont and Port Stanley. So yeah, we have some unique attributes. If you look at Belmont, a lot of people are working in London or places and like the proximity to the 401. Down in Port Stanley, you've got obviously the North Shore of Lake Erie and the natural resources to make quite a scenic community. So it's a bit of a mix. And then, of course, the two parts that are on the east and west of St. Thomas are more of an more urban housing. And they're able to, use some of the services provided by St. Thomas, but yet have their own distinct flavor. So we've got a real mix here at Central Elgin.
Yeah, and as you know, Andrew, I've got a couple places in Port Stanley. I'm very fortunate. My family cottage is down there, and I have a rental down there, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But I'm shocked at how many people, even from the GTA, have never heard of Port Stanley. It's shocking to me when the beaches are so incredibly beautiful. When I have people reaching out saying, "Oh, where's Port Stanley?" When I post my place for rent, they're shocked that beach exists.
So I would say that it will continue to become even more popular. First of all, for our friends in Toronto and areas to the west or east, accessibility and travel time better than a lot of the places to the north or to the east of Toronto. There was just an article a couple of weeks ago, and I forget the name of the publication. I had it here because I was gonna reference it. That talked about bus being between Buffalo and Detroit for our American friends, and just talked about all the attributes that Port Stanley has. We call it the jewel of the North Shore. Don't need to tell you that. You've got a couple of places here and have listed many more. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's a good thing that this hidden gem, if you will, isn't quite as well known as it could be, because one of the biggest issues, the biggest issue going forward will be growth.
Oh, well, let's talk a little bit about that, because Port Stanley has seen a massive growth. I remember when I was a kid, a lot of smaller units, not a lot of new development, but it's gone through a lot. What do you think's driving that demand?
So I think when we start here, I'm just pulling up this article. It was islands.com, and the article was between Buffalo and Detroit is Canada's Lake Erie community with great beaches and a vibrant downtown. I couldn't have said it better myself. What's driving the growth here? First of all, we've seen a lot of growth in the area over the last 10, 20 years. I mean, if you look up St. Thomas or any of the communities, there's been a tremendous amount of growth here during COVID, as a lot of people started working from home and didn't maybe have enough space in places like Toronto. They moved and looked for communities like ours. Why did they look for a community like this one? Beauty, North Shore Lake Erie, open and welcome, inclusive community, got all the services, water and wastewater, reasonable cost of living, extended care, seniors care. We have excellent facilities like that. So, and also a pretty good bargain. As a real estate person, as you can probably imagine, folks would come from east of here, put their house up for 8 or 9 or $1 million and sell it for 1.2 or 3, and come to Port Stanley, Central Elgin, and buy a home in Belmont, Port Stanley, or wherever, and pay over asking because they were making so much on the home that they were selling. So a lot of people that are new to the community came in during COVID, but historically it's been a desirable place. Proximity to the 401, access to good health care. Again, you're living on a lake and a sort of a lakefront community, which a lot of people want to do. And we have the infrastructure, wastewater and water to ensure that your investment will be protected for some time to come. I think you're going to get continued growth. Council last week, there's a development up by the water tower, which Westell Homes is going to be doing. There's going to be continued growth. If you look at what Domus has done and other builders on the east side, they've been providing new and, different types of housing. There's towns, there's rental, So I think with growth comes equality. We talk about wanting to help folks that can't maybe afford some of the more expensive places in Port Stanley, but with growth is a great equalizer. So developers are going to build to the consumer. So if the consumer is looking for something more affordable, if they're looking for a house with a basement suite, as I think you well know, the provincial government is allowing extra units within housing and, an access to the basement, a granny flat, that kind of stuff. It will change the offering that we have here. So continued growth, but hopefully some diverse options in the growth that comes forward.
Yeah, there's so many different options.
Yeah.
For sure there is up on East Road. There's condos, semis, towns, detached homes, apartment buildings for rent, like lots and lots of different options. When people ask me what I love about Port Stanley, the people and the food.
Oh, you think throw in the mayor, but that's okay.
Oh, and the mayor, he's okay too. Yeah, the restaurants are spectacular, and I love like Riva and going. I went down to GT's for breakfast this weekend while I was down there. I did, yeah. It's just such a nice place. Sit on the beach in a beautiful morning and have some eggs Benedict.
We went out for dinner last night, actually, with friends that were from Port Dover. And of course, they couldn't believe the offerings, but also how busy it was yesterday. We've had a pretty cold winter here. And as you know, Friday, Saturday weren't the best of weather, but when it finally came on Monday, the village was packed. And I think businesses did well. I think that people enjoy that kind of feeling of the vibrancy in Port Stanley on the weekend. And yeah, it was a very successful day yesterday.
Yeah, it was a great weekend. There was so much to do. We went down to Sunday Fun Day and visited the pier side after. Like it was a great weekend. Yeah. Now,
and I will say one thing. Yeah. The infrastructure, we got the roads open. I mean, the staff said they'd have them open for the long weekend, and they did. And I know that they worked hard as they, one of the things we always talk about is you've got your political arm, but you've also got people that are keeping the ship running. Washroom went into Little Beach, a permanent movable washroom, which I went down and saw, and I think is a great addition to the community. Like most people, I hate those Johnny on the spots. Not the company, but the actual, small facility of a plastic temporary washroom. And they got the roads fixed for the long weekend, and very pleased with that, as all council are, that everyone worked so hard to make sure that, things were up and running for the long weekend.
Yeah, it was great. It was super busy down there, super busy. The other thing that's really nice now, which I'm a part of and sponsor, and I saw you at the opening of, is the life jacket loan program on the beach. It's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. Well, as I said during that day, and I remember seeing you there, that I said we had the nicest beach on the North Shore of Lake Erie. Now let's have the safest one. So as you know, little community engagements like that are important. And that's back to your question about why people come to Port Stanley. I think there is a real sense of community and people wanting to contribute, and that will continue to grow.
For sure. Now, the one thing that's been getting a lot of coverage lately is the psychiatric hospital lands development. I'm curious about kind of what the future plans are and what the vision is for that development.
So as of the first week of May, the tenders are done. We have 2 offers, which will be decided in June, of who will develop the site plans. That will come to council in the 3rd week of June. So it was 410 acres, the former site plans. The government's keeping back 50 acres. Facilities owned by Infrastructure Ontario and the Ontario government. As many in the community will know, it's been many years of I won't say neglect, but a lot of cost with keeping up the lawns, keeping up the buildings as much as they did. And now, in the interest of having more housing, the government is pushing forward to develop that site. I believe most of this, as I said at council, is linked to the PowerCo development and the need for housing that will arise here in St. Thomas and in the region. So opportunity for us to build on land that wasn't being used. And it's also the opportunity for a brand new community. So we could sort of start with a fresh canvas for this one. We did engagement with the community, the council, open houses, learning sessions. I went down to Niagara on the Lake where we looked at a new community and saw what worked there and what didn't. We will have its own main street. It will be sort of a community within a community with some commercial, be it grocery and other retail. So it's the first time really in the history of Central Elgin we've been able to start on a project at the onset and look to build housing of all kinds. So mixed use, affordable, accessible, and, and take into consideration what people are looking for. Also, with the government holding back 50 acres, they have the opportunity going forward for other things that they may wish to do with the former site plans, be that a hospital, be it long-term care, be it a school. So there will always be the 50 acres there that they have to develop. So I think what we'll see, to give a bit of a timeline, we should see council picking a successful developer sometime in June, making that public. And then over the next few months, we would be looking at how to go forward with some housing. So stay tuned, but the plans are all available on our website. Some of the build out won't happen for 10 or 20 years, but we're trying to be there and ready for when the plant opens in 2028 or 9 so that people can live in this community as well as St. Thomas as they work in the growing area of electric batteries. So that's kind of the Coles notes of the site plan project. But for me, it's rewarding to see something that will be happening there. I think regardless of the cultural, and there are cultural and heritage facets, but we need to move forward with something as opposed to waiting. And I believe that there will be some consideration of the heritage elements of some are part of the buildings, but overall moving forward and showing progress there, I think has been something I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, it's certainly a big endeavor for sure. And, the hospitals obviously has some stigma attached to it, and it's been there for ever and ever and ever. But there's been some people concerned about the heritage of that building.
Yes.
But I mean, I can imagine it's full of asbestos and mold, and it's been sitting empty for years and years and years. So I think it's great that something's going in the area for sure, that it's not just wasted land. And with the lack of housing, you're right, with PowerCo coming, and we're already in a position in the province where there's a lack of housing. Right. Is there any plans in there for things like affordability is such a big issue right now in the communities at large, rental affordability, you see things come up and they say, well, it's going to be affordable housing. What does that look like? What does that mean? How does Central Elgin balance the growth while trying to keep housing attainable?
Well, I mean, let's go back to your comment about affordability, supply and demand. If we have more supply, then, hopefully we meet the demand and that the costs don't spiral even further. What can Central Elgin do? The province has done what they can. And this will be, in certain ways challenging, but to have extra units and homes that are built, whether it's an access to the basement via outside. And as I talked earlier about flats within a particular residence. And I will say though that I think any community, if we didn't have growth, like Central Elgin's grown in the 3.5 years I've been there, if we didn't have that, that's essentially like a business saying we don't have any new customers. Okay. And we have to balance that with keeping our own customers happy. Because sure, every time there's a community that's built, every time think of the neighbors around PowerCo that are upset with how the traffic is going, and it will continue, right? So look at what happened in Port Stanley when we put the new sewers in down on William Street. The majority of people understand, and you live across the street, that with infrastructure like that, there's going to be some issues but the benefit outweighs the short-term pain, if you will. So I was very pleased with how the community reacted to that. And as I say, staff conversely worked as hard as they could to have everything done by the May long weekend. So it's a continuous battle. Battle is maybe a little strong between trying to get new people in a community. I can't, as mayor, say, oh, well, we're going to do something about the water rates or the wastewater rates when we don't have new customers. If I don't have more people using the system, it'll cost more for the people that are using it now. That's just an economic reality. But to balance it, they talk about good growth and how we ensure the small town charm of a Belmont, of a Port Stanley. But with growth comes equality. If we're building, the developers are looking for what customers they need. And that includes people that want to rent a certain size home. That includes people that want to have an extra dwelling in their home. So I think that the market plays a large a role in that. And I think we've got the opportunity to provide different types of housing going forward. And that will continue to make make it a more diverse community. Jeff, if it was all wealthy retirees, the school would close. It wouldn't work. So we need that diversity. We need people that can work in the area. We need people that have, different wants, different needs, children, adults, seniors living in place. But as I've said many times, if you're going to get a community and try to just attract wealthy retirees, you won't take too long before you see some of your services changing.
Oh, I agree. Now, with all this growth, is there infrastructure projects that are kind of in the works over the next 5-10 years in Central Elgin?
Absolutely. You're seeing the one in Port Stanley with respect to every year there'd be someone post on Facebook about the flooding down by your place and by the pier side and further down. I mean, the infrastructure was not there. And the reason for that was, in 55 or 65, we had a lot of seasonal non-winterized residences down in that area, just like the other side in Orchard Beach. So what's happened now? We've gone from, I don't know what percentage of seasonal to almost no seasonal, and people are living in these places year round. Okay. When they're living in them year round, they need water, wastewater, and the infrastructure that goes with that to be year round. And that's what we're doing in Port Stanley. Infrastructure in Belmont will continue. I think, we've got a new school going in there, and the municipality has projects earmarked for the school to make sure that it's, open and ready to serve year September. But also as Belmont grows, there's wastewater issues there that will need investment. What most municipalities, and they have to by law, is have a capital asset plan. And that looks at where they're going to need to spend money in the longer term. And as long as we continue to focus on investments that are required, like bridges, infrastructure, wastewater, as opposed to, we talk about the wants versus the needs. Those are needs. And I look at infrastructure as an investment. Every dollar we put in will help citizens councils going forward without question. So we're very fortunate in many ways, but growth is important for us to continue to provide services, as many services as people expect in a community such as Belmont, Port Stanley, or even in rural areas.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. You're like going right into my next question with your responses. It's been really good. So one of the things that I have been pretty heavily involved in, and I was interviewed on CBC National News, and is about the short-term licensing that's gone on in Port Stanley in the last year in regards to the cottages that are down there and homes that are down there that people are renting out on a short-term, week-to-week generally basis. Why did Central Elgin feel the need to implement this short-term licensing program?
So, good question. I think that it started with fairness. We have commercial hotels, if you will, or inns that are paying substantial property taxes because they're commercial. So, without naming names, we have one that pays about $30,000 a year in taxes. And as someone that used to do short-term rentals, when I first started, Airbnb didn't even charge tax. So you'd be renting a room for $150 a night. The local inn or hotel, and it didn't matter what community we were in, Jeff, they'd be charging $150 or $200, plus they'd have to charge HST, plus some of them had tourism taxes, some plus. So it created a bit of an unfair playing field, which the council thought, we should look at squaring things up. Second of all, there was liability. A lot of the communities that have put in programs had concerns. The Verbos, Airbnbs, what have you, don't necessarily enforce things like how many people per unit. We had a particular unit in Port Stanley that said it could sleep 12. It was about 900 square feet, I think. If something happened in that unit, there was concern that there'd be liability for the corporation. I believe that, like any new technology, and we'll probably see it as some communities will with ride sharing. So I don't think we have Uber in Port Stanley. We might. I mean, those things, Airbnb, Uber, when it comes to transportation, all have to be looked at and under the microscope or the lens of fairness. I think that conversely, we're lucky that we have Airbnb and short-term rentals, because people that come here in the summer that want to visit, there's always been, rentals. So the differentiator came down to people that were renting for 2 days as opposed to 2 weeks. My mom and dad rented the cottage next door back in the 70s. no question. And people took it for longer periods of time. My cousin still comes from Blenheim every summer, and she rents for a week. The family comes from all over Ontario. They go to the theater, they go to restaurants, and they contribute. So rentals are not a bad thing. I think we need more because it's giving people a taste of what it would be like to live here. And maybe they'll come back and purchase a house and want to make this their home community. Fairness is the real fairness and liability were the two main things I was trying to work on, as I think most of council were. Have we gotten it right? I think time will tell. 26 is a bit of a pilot project where we can get some feedback and see how it goes forward. So that, in a nutshell, I think is why something was put forward.
Yeah. When it first came about, I kind of went in guns a-blazing. I wasn't happy about it, to be honest. I thought it was another government cash grab. And so I went to the first kind of roundtable open meeting, being a realtor that has property in Central Elgin, and I thought I could contribute to the discussion. By the end of the first meeting, I understood. I had a better understanding of why it was being done. I like the idea that at some point, I don't know if they're there yet, but the Port Stanley Visitor Center is going to have a log of short-term rentals. So when people are coming to the community and they don't know where to stay, if the inns are full, and they need a place for a family of 6, because the inns typically can't handle that kind of load without getting a couple of rooms. So, I understand now why it was being done, making sure proper egress is there, making sure that, fire alarms are up to code and, people are going to be safe when they're visiting the little village. So, I have a better understanding of it. The one thing I really fought against, Andrew, was the caps. I didn't want them to cap how many short-term rentals were going to be in the community because the businesses, I feel, thrive off of short-term rentals. My people that rent my place, they typically go out for dinner almost every night. They get their groceries at Foodland. They go to the cafes in the morning. They go down to GT's and the beach. They go to Barnacles and the pier side to listen to music and eat. And I think if the numbers were capped on how many short-term rentals there were going to be, a lot of those places may just sit vacant.
I don't disagree. There isn't a cap. Let's also talk about, all the people from PowerCo that need a place to stay when they're working. We have teams of, even when I was doing some short-term rentals 4 or 5 years ago, we'd have painting crews that were coming. My dad had a joke about his short-term rental that he used to do monthly over the year. He said, Jeff, that the people that were renting it were either building a house or leaving a spouse. And, but there's nothing more true, because when the economy is building, Jeff West would sell your home. And because he's so good, he'd sell it within 30 days and they'd go somewhere. So they'd come to us and say, can I have a 3 or 4 months rental? And the builders, the Hayhos, the Terrys, I loved those type of people because they took 3 or 4 months. They came to the community, they saw it, and then they moved to their home. I also think that with big development, you're going to have crews that need a place to stay. Well, we don't have enough rooms in St. Thomas, I guess in London, if you took it all in, for some of the groups that are going to be coming here. But project teams, I had the project team for the bridge rehabilitation in Port Stanley. The engineers stayed at my place because they needed to be here when they needed to be here. They didn't have anywhere else to stay, or they would have had to stay in London, but they got to stay close to the bridge. Working people, my niece that does some Airbnbs in St. Thomas was telling me how many people, and you'd appreciate this knowing St. Thomas and having gone to school there, the number of people she gets for hospital visits and parents who are parents who are palliative. Mm-hmm. But she had a woman with her, mom was in the hospital. Mom ends up, unfortunately, at the Barrie Hospice and stays in her room for 2 months, I think. And she can afford it. She gets to know someone there. My niece, of course, was invested and knew the mother and talked to the lady about it all the time. There's a difference between someone that's going to come and have a party in Port, or, the worst case scenario on a Friday night and upset the neighbors, versus housing that's provided for people who are coming to the community for, the potential loss of life of a loved one. So it offers all kinds of opportunities, and I think it will continue to do so. Back to Uber. I mean, look at, Uber Eats and things like that. All this technology and availability of these things will come to, they'll continue to grow. So I think people don't understand sometimes when they hear short-term rentals, they don't understand who's doing the renting.
I agree. And with the lack of affordable housing for people in the province, my short-term rental in Port, every winter, I basically rent it out to people that are campers. So they have a trailer for the entire warm season, and they're not in a position to buy a home. They're not in a position to pay $2,800 a month for rent in an apartment building or rent a house. They're not in that kind of position to do that. And Port Stanley is a great option for those people that need a place to rent, because typically the rents are lower. I know for myself in the summer times, I get great rent on my short-term rentals. So in the wintertime, I can offset it and make it more affordable for people to come and live and enjoy Port Stanley and everything that it has to offer.
So let me play devil's advocate.
Sure.
What about the concerned people? So when I went to the Airbnb conference in Los Angeles, 2008 or not, no, 2012 or 14. Okay. So 10 or 12 years ago, there were protesters there, and I didn't know why. And then they said that it was because short-term rentals were taking out long-term rentals, which then people couldn't rent because folks like yourself or myself at the time were using these places for short-term. So how do we balance the two? Do you, as a person that has an Airbnb, when you were talking with the community and talking with we had a committee through council, right? Mm-hmm. So those comments come forward that somehow you're taking off capacity by making it short-term rental. What say you on that?
Well, it depends. Port Stanley is a very different kind of kettle of fish, because really there are some properties that are short-term rentals in Port that aren't sustainable long term. Like, people can't live in them in the winter because they're too cold. So they have no other option. And I look what's happened in the city of London. London has outlawed short-term rentals, and things have gone awry there. There's some property owners are like, well, I'm not renting it long term because the landlord tenant board is broken. Yeah. I think
no. There's
you get a tenant in long term who stops paying the rent and destroys the house, and it causes all kinds of issues. So people in London, I know there's some homes that are just sitting there vacant and empty because they don't want to rent them long term. And because the real estate market is not great right now, they're holding on to that house in the hopes that the market's going to recover at some point and they'll be able to sell it. But it's very, very difficult, very difficult. And I understand the need for long-term rentals, but right now there are lots of rentals available long-term.
And I also agree, that empty house is better than a bad tenant.
Well, Andrew, at the end of every one of my episodes, I always try and promote a local small business. So this week I picked one in Port Stanley, and the owner, Ellen LaCroix, she created the Edible Journey.
I know
it's an eclectic space. It's got lots of color, vibrancy. It encourages self-care, vitality, and a culinary inspiration. They've got an organic juice bar with green smoothies, daily juices, wheatgrass, immune booster shots. They have fresh, healthy salad bar with lots of veggies, microgreens, whole grains. Everything is locally grown and organic. They've got homemade in-house dressings that they have, and they try to really encourage healthy eating. They even have healthy desserts, wheat-free, dairy-free, low sugar. I believe that you visit the old Telegraph House once in a while and hang out on the Zen Garden at 205 Main Street, but I just wanted to give them a shout out.
And Allison was there on Saturday, and North sold her a lot of stuff, but they have this peanut sauce that is to die for, and we have in the fridge. So shout out to Ellen and shout out to North. Thank them for their contributions to the community.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Well, it's been great chatting with you. I really appreciate your insight into Central Elgin and the growth and the development and the things that are going on. I appreciate your time.
Well, our thanks to you, Jeff. Your engagement of the community is well known. We appreciate that. You're an excellent ambassador for Central Elgin, and I hope you'll continue to be one.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right, let's get closing.
Thank you. Bye.